Welcome to the Brain Friendly channel, where we explore what it really means to lead, coach, and live in a way that works with how the human brain actually functions. Today, I am delighted to be joined by Tania Willis. She's the president of the Australasian chapter for the International Coaching Federation. So Tania is a highly experienced coach based in Canberra and someone who has already completed the Brain Friendly Leadership certification with us. She's about to finalize her practitioner certification as well. And this makes her a wonderful person to speak with, because I think that in this era that we are navigating, it's very important that all coaches need to understand how the brain works. Would you agree?
Absolutely, I agree. I think it's a really important part of the world that we're working in right now and the difficulties that a lot of our leaders are facing. So, absolutely.
So, based on your experience and interacting with leaders as you do, what are some of the most critical challenges that you are observing in people?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things that I'm seeing coaching and facilitation because I do a lot of facilitation work as well. There's a few things that are shifting all at once right now. And the first is that the traditional career ladder is quietly disappearing. I mean, it's been happening for a while. It's certainly something that came up in my past experience in higher education with students, but it's really disappearing. And of course, AI is having a big impact on that and absorbing the entry-level work across the professional services. And so I think emerging leaders in particular are not necessarily getting what I call a slow apprenticeship that used to build that, we used to build judgment and confidence. And they're being asked to lead sooner with much less scaffolding in environments that are much more complex and more pressured than anything we've seen before. The second shift, I think, is that coaching itself is broadening. So we're talking about this a lot in the ICF at the moment, and we're moving beyond one-on-one executive coaching. We still have that, obviously, but more into team coaching and systemic coaching, which is really, really exciting because people increasingly realize when they purchase coaching that you cannot coach an individual out of a team environment that doesn't change. The environment always wins, right? That's a really important part of that systemic coaching piece. And the last piece, I think, is that evidence matters more than ever. So clients, HR leaders and sponsors all really want to know what works and why. And that's where I think the new neuroscience-backed approaches come in. They give us that credible science-informed foundation for what good coaches have always sort of done intuitively. And our profession is really needs to work to take that seriously so that we've got that rigor around coaching. And these approaches sort of help us to craft the coaching to what we now understand about how humans actually think, how they feel, and how they adapt.
That's a great answer. And I'm wondering, being the president of the Australasian chapter, you probably interact with many, many coaches. What would you say is the uptake of coaches that want to learn about neuroscience and use it with their clients?
Yeah, I think it's getting very popular. I've got a number of friends in the coaching world that do have more of a neuro background in their coaching training. And a lot of the coaching programs, we're seeing a lot of the coaching programs also incorporate neuroscience into their coaching training as well. So I think it's definitely something that's on a lot of people's minds, and it is starting to become more and more included in coaching training and also in the coach's toolkit as they work through what they want to add to the tools that they use as coaches. Yeah.
Okay. And having become acquainted with the iPhone Your Leader methodology, what are some of the learnings and the insights that you have taken from this methodology?
Oh boy. When I did the Neuroleader 360 results as part of my the leadership training, the assessment revealed lots to me, and that's why I loved it so much, because it's a strength-based approach, which I think is really important, and it revealed these gaps between how I saw myself and how others experienced me, which is really common in most 360s, right? And they were mostly in communication, influence and integration. And in those areas where I myself had been most self-critical whereas others were actually consistently rating me high. And so I guess the aha moment for me when I was looking at my results was that my brain was not actually giving me an accurate picture of my own impact. And I'd spent years assuming, I guess, that my inner experience of hesitancy and self doubt was actually what people were seeing in me, right? But it wasn't. Others were actually seeing conviction, authority, and warmth, and that was beautiful. So that gap for me was entirely internal, and it was liberating. It meant that my work was not to build new capability, but really to trust the capability that I already had. And professionally, it's also changed how I hold my clients. When a sort of leader tells me now that they're not feeling confident, I look at that a little bit more. I don't necessarily, I don't dismiss that, of course, but I no longer treat that as reliable data. So what I do is I treat it as one version of the story. And as coaches, we get curious about that gap, right? And that's where that real coaching happens. It happens in the gap. So it's really changing how I'm coaching, and I'm loving it.
That's fantastic. And if you think about yourself as a person and your brain, and what are some of the things that your brain think, or how your whole body feels about situations, having had this realization, what are some of the practical steps that you have taken away with you, or things that you have implemented to modify, for example, these inner thoughts that you had about yourself before?
Yeah, I think I'm certainly much more aware of it. And so I talk to myself a lot, both outward and inward. So I ask myself these questions all the time. And I'm very conscious of what that feeling and what that sense is. And I think the important part of that is how I'm feeling in my body. So I start to notice that a lot more now than what I've ever used to before. I've actually got more understanding of how things affect me in my body. And the great thing about that, of course, is I also recognize that much more when I'm coaching. So I constantly assessing where clients are. It's always better when you do it face to face if you can, but you can't always do that. I'm able to, I guess, be more intuitive, pay closer attention to the state my client arrives in, help them to de-stress if they need to. I no longer I should say, I try not to no longer jump into problem solving. That is one of my big areas where I just want to go straight into problem solving, because I want them to be able to settle first, and sometimes through breaths, sometimes through naming what's going on, and sometimes through silence. And so that conversation ends up being different. The other part to that is I give myself more permission, right? Because balance came up for me. So permission to rest, permission to not fill every silence. I have been doing this for years and years and years. I'm a helper. And so it's a very strong strength for me. It's instinctual. So I've learned through this work, and that's not that I don't want to be a helper. It's, I guess, what I don't want to do is burn out because I help too much. And I also don't want to disempower people, right? I want to make sure that I'm supporting and scaffolding and not actually taking away from their ability to help themselves. So that's probably the most powerful piece for me.
So many concepts and so many practicalities that I believe must have changed the way you coach. And how are your clients taking this new approach?
I think they're taking it well. I think the framework's really helpful, and they're able to really see the difference. The problem is a lot of clients don't know what they don't know, so they don't necessarily know what the differences of coaching are. So, but they're really excited about it. They can really see the framework. We use the map. They sit down and they go through the map, and we ask the questions, and they work through some action items and ways to actually support them through their process as they work through what they need to do, and as they work through their coaching program. Yeah.
Excellent. So, in terms of working with organizations in Canberra and probably making them aware that this new trend of creating brain-friendly leaders and brain-friendly cultures and brain-friendly teams actually make an organization potentially less toxic or more nurturing or more efficient, because we also and more human.
Yeah, more
Because
human.
now with I was just reading some statistics the other day that AI can speed up process and making us very efficient, but it also will disconnect us even more, because some people can use AI in a way that makes them really fast, but not everybody is doing the same. So that creates a void and a different conversation between different people from the team. How would you say, how would you like to use, or how would you like organizations to see this approach to developing humans?
Yeah, I think the hardest part when there is a new approach, this is where it's really tricky, is that often these new approaches are much further ahead than where others are, where they're thinking about coaching. It's the same with coaching, full stop,
Yes,
right? So, yeah,
exactly.
so that's where the evidence base is really important. And so what I am trying to do, I'm trying to do lots of different work on my website and my offerings at the moment so that I can bring all that evidence piece in. And I'd like to get some more testimonials and things like that, because we do need that. But I think the hard part is trying to cut through, right? How can we do that with, organizations have used certain tools in the past that they're really wedded to. And cutting through that is often very difficult. And I think that's the first step. It's a work in progress.
Yes, well, offering pilots or offering the person, the decision maker, an experience of what they will get, and being patient and insistent probably is one approach that you can take. Because
Yeah,
at the end of the day, it's not that you are not offering coaching and development. You're just using different tools or using the brain as the core.
that's right. And I think there's a space right now where well-being and all sorts of different things are happening in the marketplace. There's a lot more people, the younger generation are really onto that, which is actually
Yes.
really wonderful to see. So I think there will be changes. And I think it's just a matter of how do we support that change as well, because we can be part of the change. Yeah.
You know, that you just reminded me of something I saw the other day, how younger people are not going so much to party at night, but they are going to Bondi Beach in this case, and having matcha mornings or coffee mornings and dancing on the beach, because they realize that it's much healthier, for example. So this would be, if we can make a parallel with that, is people change their awareness. Obviously, when you're younger, you're more prone to want to change than when you're older, but it's the same situation that is happening with AI. You can reject it completely and not want to study any AI, or you may want to jump on the wagon and try to see what you can do and how you can change your practices with AI, whether we agree
Absolutely.
with it or not, but that's the way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, based on, obviously, I want to hear a little bit about your story and how you got into coaching, because that
Yeah.
determines a lot about, your path in life and how it can enlighten other people to follow if they wanted to.
Yeah. So I have a background of about 30 years almost in higher education. And it was a really, really wonderful, wonderful long career for me. I was incredibly lucky. I just sort of wandered in there one day. I don't know how. I got some casual work and just started there and started right at the bottom, right? And just I had a fabulous career. I studied as well while I was working. So I did a bachelor's in administrative leadership and then a master's in leadership later on at another university. So I worked in two universities. And what actually happened was after about I had my last job, or my last part of that work was at senior leadership level, and I'd probably done that about almost 20 years at leadership level, and then into senior leadership, managing and leading different teams, small teams, large teams, high volume processing teams, student pastoral care support teams, and wellbeing teams, which was my last one. And I was really, really burnt out after that, as I was leading the wellbeing team of one of the universities, a student wellbeing team. And of course, COVID hit, and it was, as you imagine, right? A bit crazy. So really burnt out. So I took a VR in the end, and it was the hardest decision I've ever made. It took me a year to say that's what I wanted to do. very much a part of my identity, boy. And so that loss for me was, it felt like grief, and I had no idea that's what I was actually going through at the time. And at the time I thought, you know what, I love coaching. I was working with some student leaders in a program with the University of Minnesota and some work in Malawi, and that was wonderful. And I was doing some coaching in that space, strengths-based coaching and intercultural coaching, and I had some training in that specific area. And I thought, I really love this work. And so when I left, I decided I was going to retrain as a coach and do my certificate and a diploma. And so now I'm PCC and built my hours. So it felt like coming home, really. It was just a natural progression. I've always, I guess, led people using a coaching methodology, which I didn't know about at the time. And so that training really helped. I tell you what, though, when I did my training, I found that I was probably one of the worst listeners. My husband would say that all the time, but not a great listener. Well, I thought I was better than what I was. I'm a good listener, but not as good as what you need to be as a coach. The presence and the understanding of where people and their energy and all of that. And so that has been a really big shift for me. And I listen much more deeply now and much more effective in that area. I think my husband's decided that I am a listener now, hopefully, maybe not.
That's good. Thanks God. So for someone who may be hesitating going into the coaching profession, as someone who is very much in touch with, coach is an association that leads the coaching field, what do you recommend people to do to make sure that they choose wisely?
Oh, great question. And this is actually really a great question because we've recently, so as you said, I'm the president of ICF Australasia, and I love this work. It's volunteer role. And I have a really great bunch of people around us that are all volunteers across Australia and New Zealand. And they're fabulous people who do lots of amazing work. They're all coaches, all credential coaches, all working towards it. Most of them in the volunteer area are credential coaches. And what I found was quite difficult when I was looking, and I'm from the sector, right, was actually where can I find a really good quality education provider? What we've just recently done is we've actually now put all of our training providers in Australasia on our Australasia website. So people can go there and now they can search. So you can still go to the global, because it's a global organization. You can still go to global and find all of the global places. But some people want to, they want to study it face to face, or they might want an Australian provider. So we have done that now, and I'm super excited that I've had a great person working on that particular piece, on that particular project, and it's been 18 months in the making. We haven't got everybody on there. We know that, so we're working through that as we go. But that's probably the first step, is to look through there. Have a look at the ICF Australasia website as well, so that you know what you need to do, and always reach out to our volunteers in the branches, in the local regions, because it's a really wonderful community. When I walked into my first ICF meeting in ACT, I felt so welcome and supported. It was just a wonderful community, and everybody supports one another, and you feel like you really belong there.
In terms of encouraging people to do coaching in an era where people can ask any question to AI, and whether it's correct or not correct, or whether it's biased or not, people still use it. So how do you encourage people to take up coaching? Because it's a lot of hours to become a very good coach, considering what's happening in the market with AI. What would you say to them?
Yeah, great question. I think the most important thing is that AI is not human. It's inherently biased. I use AI. I love AI, right? I absolutely love it. It helps me a lot with the work that I do, but it augments my work. It doesn't replace my work. And I think the people aspect and the human aspect is really important. And it doesn't have to be face to face. It is better if it is. Well, I think it is. Others probably not so much. But virtual works just as well. And, you can find some answers, but the other thing about coaching is really it's not about answers. It's about empowering you to find your own answers. And so they're there. Coaches just help you with finding them. And they might help you with some information here and there to find those answers. but it's not really about giving you answers, because at the end of the day, an answer that I give you might be completely different to an answer that you need based on your worldview, your background, the things that you need. And so that's why answers are really not the key to actually development and supporting yourself and supporting your own, I guess, education and development.
That's right. Definitely, understanding what coaching is actually for and how it can be conducted to your benefit is something that anyone can find out. Talk to a friend, talk to someone that understands coaching, and really figure out how, having a conversation with someone that has the experience to draw answers from you will help your brain rewire and think a bit differently.
Yeah.
That's the number one thing to consider. And I think that everybody should learn coaching, by the way, because, as humans or as part of a partnership or as parents or as teachers or workers, when we listen better, when we know what questions to use, we are better humans, really. Our consciousness evolves significantly, right?
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. And I think it's really funny when you actually learn coaching, you become a coach, right? You live it, you breathe it, you are a coach. And my supervisor talks about that a lot as well, that you're being a coach, not doing coaching. And my funny story, I hope my son doesn't mind me saying this, but he might contact me and say, and ask a question, and I'll start coaching, and he goes, "No, Mum, I just want the answer. I don't want you to coach me." And that's really interesting that you actually start to be a coach, and you listen much better and you actually help with answers. And I wish I had have had that when I was parenting a young person, right? Because my
Yes.
son's 30 now.
Exactly.
It would have
Yeah.
been wonderful to have
Yeah.
that sort of insight as a parent. Yeah.
Yeah. And under stress, people will go to give the answer because it's fast.
Yep.
And you don't have to worry too much about. We are not teaching people to think by themselves, and that's a really important development opportunity for anyone.
Absolutely.
So, any final words to our audience in terms of coaching, neuroscience, yourself? What would you like to say to someone who is listening to you today as a final message?
Oh boy. I think the funny thing is with the Neuroleader and the leadership program is that I just stumbled across it, and there was something saying to me, I don't know what it was, but it was something just saying to me, this is something that you should do. And that doesn't normally happen to me. I guess I would say if that is something that you're feeling that you are interested in and it's calling you, there's probably a reason for that. And that's what happened to me. So the framework pulled me in, and the certification has given me, I guess, the language, the framework, the things that I've actually been intuitively doing, but I just felt like the investment was really helpful for me because it allowed me to it's improved my coaching. So when I attended the Brain Friendly Leadership Certification, I took away, I guess, more of an understanding of the connection of my brain with my body. That was a really important one. I also took away some really great ways of supporting leaders with their work, particularly with the breath, the meditation, emotional regulation. I thought that was really fantastic. And how the four connect together. So the performance, the collaboration, the innovation, and the agility piece, how that coherent framework all works together. When I completed the i4 Neuroleader 360 assessment, I realized that I had this significant gap between how I saw myself and how others experienced me, particularly in communication, influence, and integration. So the aha moment for me was that my brain was not giving me that accurate picture of my own impact. So I'd spent sort of years assuming that my inner experience of self-doubt, hesitancy was what people were receiving, but it wasn't. So that gap is where I can now start to get curious, particularly when I'm working with clients, and find out what their experience is, because that's where real coaching happens, in that gap. So as someone who is a PCC coach with ICF, I find that the i4 Neuroleader assessment is different in that it is much more strength-based, and you don't have some of those difficult conversations or difficult comments that can come from that process. I think it's a much safer, supportive assessment than others that I've used in the past. We talk about this a lot in the coaching space, that sometimes as coaches are coaching people who've been broken by 360s. And the Neuroleader 360 is not one of those type of 360s. And I love the 360. I think it's a wonderful tool, and I want to use it more. And I'm really excited about having it.
Wonderful. So thank you so much, Tania, for this conversation today, for your insight and for the work that you are doing with people. I think that having people like you helping leaders and humans in general is the way forward in a very technologically crowded world. So thank you for that. And to everyone watching, if this conversation resonated with you, make sure you follow the Brain Friendly channel for more conversations on the intersection of neuroscience, leadership, coaching, and human development.